Hello, friends. The famous author of such bestsellers as Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find. Hello, all. This is a follow up to the short video I did about the man who was being sentenced to jail, but recognized the judge was his actual friend from high school. How, I don't know if to say embarrassing, but very difficult to swallow, basically, to see someone who you schooled with is a judge doing well, whereas you're going to jail. So this is a follow-up for the full video to see where he's at, what happened next. For everyone who was requesting for it, here you are. I'll send you the link as well. But hope you enjoy this. Let's see what happens. I haven't actually watched it. Okay, so let's see what happens. Writer Joan Rowling once said in an interview the wonderful words, "Only our choices reveal who we really are, much more than our abilities." And she certainly knows that. After all, before she became a famous and mega-rich writer, she was at the very bottom. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that went so viral a few years ago that it went around the world in a matter of days and won the hearts of millions of people. It's probably the best example of how two perfectly equal people making different choices in their lives determine their path in life. But first things first. Shout out to Stream. In 2015, a very unusual meeting took place in a Miami, Florida courtroom. Judge Mendy Glazer was presiding over the case of a man arrested for theft just days earlier. A man named Arthur Booth had been apprehended by police officers as he was driving his car and attempting to evade law enforcement. His car had been reported missing after a robbery. During the chase, Booth tried to evade several times before he had an accident and crashed his car, after which he tried to run from the guards on foot but was soon caught. This courtroom trial was no different than any other. Judge Mendy Glazer was in her sitting position after reviewing the case file. Opposite her stood the criminal Arthur Booth, who was far from the first time he had met in a courtroom, having served his time in prison several times before, unwavering and with a cold stare. Arthur looked confidently into the eyes of the judge and showed with all his appearance that he was not afraid at all and was no longer afraid of anything. Perhaps the verdict would have ended and everyone would have gone their separate ways. The judge would have gone home after work and Arthur would have gone back to prison. But what happened next made the defendant weep like a baby. Unexpectedly, the judge asked the defendant an irrelevant question.
Yes, ma'am. Did you go to Nautilus for middle school?
After these words, the defendant changed his face and began to look intently into the facial features of the judge. The prosecutors and the defendants began to look at each other, not understanding what was going on. Arthur looked at the woman for a few more seconds, and then uttered these words, "Oh my God, this can't be. My God, I'm so embarrassed." After which the defendant, who had stood there a few moments before with a confident look, bowed his head before the judge and expressed his confusion about the circumstances of their meeting, began to cry, rubbing his hands over his eyes, repeating the same phrase, "My God." As it turned out, at that moment Arthur recognized in the judge his old acquaintance, after which he lost his temper and burst into tears. As it turned out, more than 30 years ago, he had a completely different life. Like many teenagers, Arthur had dreams of a successful career. His outstanding abilities in math and science made him one of the best students in school, and not just any school, but the Nautilus School, which in the late 70s was not only prestigious, but considered one of the best in Miami. Arthur was selected to attend Nautilus High School after achieving outstanding grades at William Brent Elementary School. His parents were happy about the boy's ability. As the eldest of 3 children in the family, he simply burned with learning and even dreamed of becoming a neurosurgeon. Arthur strived to study, learned Spanish on his own, and achieved outstanding grades. Coming from a simple, poor family, he traveled to school by bus for almost an hour and later became an honorary student. It seemed that this gifted boy was destined for college and a successful career, and it pained Judge Glazer doubly to see Arthur before her.
This is the nicest kid in middle school.
Oh my goodness.
He was the best kid in middle school. I used to play football with him.
Mendy later said in the courtroom, "The last time I saw Arthur, I was just a little girl with a baby face. I too had ambitions and wanted to be a veterinarian, but all that was nothing compared to Arthur. He was the best student and I admired him. And now I look at him and I don't understand how that could have happened. Look what happened to you, Arthur. The judge turned to the defendant. Arthur could not contain his emotions the whole time. The desperate criminal sobbed and covered his face with his hands. It so happened that 35 years later, the two classmates met in the courtroom where one was the judge and the other on the bench who had just been released from prison a few months earlier. As Arthur's sister later told us, at the age of 17, our honor student got addicted to gambling. At first, it started out like many others, playing cards for small change. Then the stakes got bigger and bigger and there wasn't enough money. Arthur chose the wrong company and later got into debt. Depression and anxiety prompted our hero to try light drugs for the first time. And then everything was as usual: addiction, a constant need for money, and attempts to get it at any cost made him a criminal. That's how Arthur went from a promising young man into a robber and ended up in prison. It would seem a meeting of two classmates is a great excuse to remember childhood. But the realities were very different. Judge Mendy asked Arthur if he realized what he was doing was wrong and if he agreed with the charges, to which the defendant confessed to breaking the law and knowing his guilt. All the while, Arthur was afraid to raise his head and stood with his eyes downcast. But this touching meeting ended in a reality check when the judge set bail at $43,000, or 1 year in jail. She also had some parting words to say to him. "Mr. Booth, I really hope you can turn your life around. It really hurts me to see you here. I have the best memories of you. Just think about what I told you. It's up to you to change things."
Good luck to you, sir. I hope you're able to come out of this okay and just lead a lawful life.
But as you can imagine, the story doesn't end there. As it would later turn out, Mendy's words had touched Arthur to the core. 10 months later, Arthur was released for good behavior. All the while in prison, he read books and was interested in business. Since he had already lost his dream once, which was to become a surgeon, he decided to start all over again. After his release, ex-convict Arthur and Judge Mendy met again. Arthur came to the courtroom and wanted to personally thank her for the words she had said to him at the time. He promised her he would never be in prison again and would give up gambling and drugs. He kept his word. It's been almost 5 years since then. Now Arthur is quite a successful manager of a pharmaceutical company. He earns enough money not to deny himself anything. He travels the world and lives in his own house. He's done with his former addictions long ago. He voluntarily underwent treatment and doesn't want to go back to it. Arthur is still in touch with his former classmate and is very grateful to fate that it brought them together back then in the courtroom, and it was Mendy who confronted him. As he says himself, her words changed my whole life. The motivation of an old friend was that Arthur, released from prison, just had to make the right choice in life, and he did. And this story of the meeting of two classmates shows perfectly that only our choices and our decisions determine who we will become and predetermine our path in life. Do you agree with these words? Write your opinion in the comments.
Yes,
That's all
please,
for
write in
today.
the comments.
Like the video and see you soon.
Wow.
Hello, friends.
Wow. You know what, guys? That is such a good ending to that dramatic story, man. What impressed me was the fact that in prison he was actually studying, trying to get some education, and look at now, he's become the manager of a pharmaceutical company. That shows the decisions we make, the choices we make, will determine where we end up. And that phrase that this gentleman said at the end is so true. Guys, please make the right choices, make the right decisions. It is a life and death situation. The choices we make determines our destiny going forward. So I love this. For everyone asking me for this follow-up, here it is. I hope you enjoyed that, man. I'm going to bring you more, but I'm so impressed. Even I'm motivated. I hope you were motivated. Leave in the comments what you think about this success story at the end. Something that started tragic ended up being good for his life. Faith. Isn't that amazing? So yeah, have a good week ahead. Whatever you do, keep safe, make the right decisions, make the right choices, man. It's a life and death situation. So I'll see you on the next one. I'm signing off. One love.